Hello everyone. Since the beginning of this school year, and really even at the end of last year, I focused a great deal on our teachers stating the learning objectives or standards in each of our classrooms. As I stop into classrooms, I've noticed that we are doing very well. Over the course of the past few weeks, I visited 30 classrooms, and 80% of the classes that I went into had some type of objective on the board. The reason for this video is to make sure that the goals that we are stating are high quality and clear for our students. First of all, why are we even doing this? What's the purpose of stating objectives? Well, anything that I've read about good teaching practices says that clearly communicating to students the objectives of the lessons really impacts learning. There is a great deal of research to support this also. In a study of setting goals and objectives that synthesized the findings of about 204 reports, they found that the average effect size was 0.55. Now, what that means is that the average score in classes where goal setting was effectively employed would be about 21 points higher than the average score in classes where goal setting was not employed. So this is just one piece, but there's a lot of information saying that goal setting really does help student learning. Now, there's a difference between writing a learning objective on the board and then writing just the activity for the class or just stating a topic on the board. And there's a difference. So a couple of non-examples of what I would call effective objectives is if you write on the board things like French and Indian War or similar triangles or cell structures or mythology. These are all topics and probably the topics that we're going to cover, but doesn't really tell the students what they need to learn by the end of the class period. Other non-examples are completing the practice worksheet or working in groups to do a task or write a rough draft or do a lab on how chemicals react. These are all activities, and frankly, these could be written on the board as part of a daily agenda, which again is helpful for students to know what they're going to do for the class period. But again, it doesn't really tell the students what they need to leave the class knowing or what they're really working towards. One of the reasons we want objectives to be clear is that students can self-assess whether or not they've learned the goal that you've stated for them. And then also, secondly, as a teacher, you can assess whether or not they truly understand what you've taught them. And I recognize, too, that some disciplines or standards do not lend itself to daily objectives, a new objective every single day. So even if you post the unit standards somewhere in your room or the unit objectives and then point out to the class on which ones you'll be working that particular day, that would again help clarify for students what they are working toward. One way to structure quality learning objectives is by starting out with a STEM, depending on what you're doing in that class period. Now these aren't required, but some STEMs make it easier to structure the objective. For example, one STEM would be students will be able to blank. And these are helpful when, that STEM's helpful when you're working on skills or strategies or processes in classes like math, chemistry, art, music, or even if you're doing some writing in class. Students will understand is a STEM that you could use when things are more informational in nature. Using the STEM I can is very student friendly and helps clarify for students what they are learning in class. This will also help the students by the end of the period ask themselves a question, can I meet that particular target or that particular objective? And if the answer is no, it'll be clear to them that they need to seek some additional help. Another thing you could do is pose a big question that students will be able to answer by the end of the class period about your particular subject in which you're teaching the class. I know that many of you already know how to write good quality objectives, but it's worth refreshing our memory. Here are some examples of good objectives. Students will be able to recognize and list the literary devices found in a given short story. I can describe how changes in A, H, and K affect the graph of a function. Students will understand the basic structures of an atom. Students will create Venn diagrams which compare and contrast the Vietnam War and Korean War. I can identify similarities and differences between Christianity and Mormonism. I can develop a counter-argument given an argument from an article. Students will understand the rules of team handball. And again, each of these objectives, you can, as a teacher, evaluate whether or not they've met the objective for the day. And the students can self-assess whether or not they've met the objective from the day at the end of the class period. So now that you've posted your objectives on the board, now what? So at the beginning of class period, it's good to go over the objectives. So you could say something like, "Good morning, everyone. Today, what I want you to leave this class period with is knowing blank." You can even do something more with it. You could even have them share with a partner for 30 seconds what they already know about this topic. Or you can have them keep a list of those daily objectives over the course of the unit. Once a student does something with the learning objective, it really puts it in the forefront of their mind so they can stay focused on that objective throughout the class period. And then at the end of class, you can ask, "Do you now know blank?" You can have them ask 2 questions before they leave class about the objective. Or you can have them take out a half sheet of paper and write what they've learned about that particular objective. And also add 1 question that they still might have. You can have them just, with a show of fingers, on a scale of 1 to 5, share how confident that they are if you gave them a quiz the next day that they would get a question right. This really provides the students, again, the opportunity to self-assess, which gives them ownership of their learning. If you pose a question, for example, at the beginning of class, the goal should be that at the end of the period, or for homework or sometime after, the students actually answer the question. This could be done by having students write their answer in their notebook or in Notability, or have them pair up to answer the questions with each other. And again, the goal should be for them to answer the question in some format by the end of the class period. Finally, the big picture is, for a given unit, each objective that you have for each class will be tied to your assessments, whether that be a test, a paper, or project. By clearly communicating your objectives each day, both you and the students will know which objectives they understand and which they do not. This will hopefully help them be prepared for whatever summative assessment that you have for them. Thank you for watching this video.